Hi, Anthony Giannoumis. Welcome to the Collabwith interviews.
Hello, nice to see you.
So you are the chair of the board for inclusive creation. So
Yes.
what does it mean for you, inclusive creation and design?
I mean, we came up with the idea because there was a space in the market for people like myself and my co-founder, Anne Eagle-Churn, to create something new that will enable organizations and individuals to think more inclusively and act more inclusively. And the origin story here is really special because for me, one of the most satisfying experiences I've had over my career has been working at a ground up level with stakeholders and with individuals who can benefit from these inclusion activities. One of those individuals was one of my former students. And so she came up to me in her first semester studying computer science and said, Anthony, I'm really nervous to talk to you because I've never done this sort of thing before, but I have this idea around empowering women in different parts of the world to gain access to menstrual products. And so I said, you know what you're doing is amazing. And it made me very excited to hear from her all of her ideas and ways of working and thinking. And so we embarked on that day to what has now been a 10-year collaboration in many different aspects, both within the context of her schoolwork, but also as co-founders of Inclusive Creation. So for me, the joy I get from working on this project also comes out of the joy I had for seeing this young student evolve and grow into an amazing leader in this field.
What are the steps or, the angles we have to consider, because in my case, I am doing digital platforms, digital tools, but as well educational programs and books. So how or what are the points I have to take care, in my position, for instance, or any kind of entrepreneur or academic as well, we have to take into account to be inclusive when we design programs, books, digital platforms, products. What are the points we have to take into account?
I think this is the kind of $1 million question around inclusion. And the real reason why it's a $1 million question is because everyone's trying to figure out how to crack that nut. And that nut is taking different forms and shapes every day of the year. And so it can be really frustrating or really at least confusing for a lot of people who are embarking on their career to try to tackle this at an early stage of a startup or even within established industries. It can be really concerning to try to find ways of reorienting your organization or company. But we've come up with some really compelling mechanisms for achieving that. And the number one thing I always tell them, because the questions I often get are, this is going to cost a lot of money. How can we possibly afford it? And so the number one thing that a lot of entrepreneurs can do, and number one thing that a lot of businesses can do, is simply changing their mindset. It's just a matter of taking a step back and saying, you know what, I'm not going to fix it all at once. But by changing my mindset, it allows me to start establishing new processes, new procedures, new initiatives that can evolve your organization, can change the way you structure your startup to enable inclusion to kind of have space to grow and flourish. Now, that might be a little bit kind of hooey and it feels a little bit abstract. More concrete ways of doing this is to surround yourself with people who think differently than you.
And this is coming, I think it's a nice bridge to the inclusive leadership. I think we are preparing a masterclass for Collabwith with you about inclusive leadership. So this is related to the mindset. So how do you relate the part of design, and create in a very inclusive way to become an inclusive leader?
Yes, I think this is another really important point because a lot of CEOs, a lot of executives are trying to find ways to enable their company to be more inclusive. And I think for the most part, and across a lot of industries, CEOs are aware And they're kind of turned on to inclusion. They know that it's an important critical component of their organization, just like sustainability is a critical component. But what they've kind of struggled with is moving beyond just compliance, moving beyond just, yes, the legal check marks of, well, we're not discriminating against people, therefore we're doing everything we can. They are motivated, but they hit friction points when it comes to how do we attract the talent into our organization that's going to enable us to be more inclusive, to be more diverse. And one of the kind of key things, and it might sound really obvious, and coming from somebody who's being interviewed right now and doing a lot of talking, but one of the key ways that I have found to lead more inclusively is just to stop talking. It's just about creating space so others can have a voice in the discussions that are happening. Now, it's not that easy because, of course, there are many instances where you can have a diverse team around the table. And even if the CEO or the executive stops talking, that doesn't necessarily mean there's enough trust in the room that will enable someone who is underrepresented maybe to speak their mind. Right. So I think that's the first step, keeping your mouth closed for a minute, giving space to others to have a voice, but then finding mechanisms to establish trust and connection between and among the members of the team. So that way, when that person who is underrepresented, who's maybe a little bit quiet or shy, or maybe even has a psychosocial disability, where they're just not quite comfortable bringing out their voice in a meeting, giving them as much of an opportunity to successfully contribute to that meeting as possible by removing those barriers, by eliminating those barriers, that sense of intimidation. And trust is that number one way. So the other mechanism, so we have keeping your mouth shut, number one. Number two is leading by example and exposing your own vulnerabilities. Being really comfortable as a leader saying, I don't know, but I see the kind of clock ticking in your brain. I see you in the corner of the room. I think you have something really important to contribute to this discussion. Could I please have your opinion? Can I please have your input? Inviting that discussion in. So it gets back to the compliance issue. It's not just about not discriminating. We have to take active steps to promote the inclusion of underrepresented people in our organizations.
And this case reminds me to one professor once in Germany. He was very into, gender equality and bringing women researchers into the team and provide them with leadership positions. But he was disappointed because they said, they are not taking their leadership role as a leader. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, what is the situation of this woman? Mm-hmm. Because if they are not only women, they were immigrants from Latin America in Germany. What does it mean this? It means a lot of stuff. Immigrant in Germany from Latino community, you have already a different communication style. Definitely. So when a German is saying falsch gemacht, as a Spanish woman, it's like, okay, what is happening here?
Why is he being so aggressive?
And maybe they are only talking in a normal way, but it's very like, so you have this type of component of, like, intersectionality, immigration, woman, whatever, communication, culture, you have ton of stuff. Yeah. So it's not like it's only a woman. I put a woman in the leadership position. You have to look at the thing, how you be inclusive, understanding, listening, like bringing the voice, like empower them. It's not like you have this title here, as a leader, What in this situation, what is your advice, Anthony?
Sure. So, I mean, the first thing is to treat the whole person. So, putting a label on somebody as a woman and then trying to find ways of making them a woman leader, that can be really stigmatizing, and it can provoke a lot of feelings of this imposter syndrome, The feeling of, oh, I was only chosen because of my gender. And so taking into account the entirety of the individual is was step one. Understanding that the cultural context matters, understanding that their experience maybe as a woman of color matters, their experience as someone who might be identify along the LGBT spectrum matters. So it brings me back to a story of when I first kind of messed up in this area. And I say messed up because I really kind of not only put my foot in my mouth, but just completely butchered my job, what I was supposed to be doing. So I was invited to run a hackathon for a group of women entrepreneurs in the fashion industry based in Ethiopia. Okay. Now, I have no idea about the fashion industry. I can put on a suit, but that's about as far as my fashion interests go. I'm embarrassingly kind of don't have competence and experience of understanding the cultural context in Ethiopia, certainly not for women entrepreneurs. But I went ahead and committed to it. And I said, you know what? This is my chance to make an impact. This is my chance to take the knowledge and experience I've gained over the years and try to find ways of bringing that to others. So I really took it serious, the importance of my work and what I was doing. The problem that I had was I got tunnel vision. So the first day of this workshop, I'm just in my zone as if I was running this workshop here in Norway or in the United States or anywhere else. It was just, this is how we're going to do it, folks. We're really excited to make this happen. And I'm looking at this audience and it's just kind of eerily quiet. And so I kind of just tentatively continue, not really trying to provoke anything, but trying to kind of help them understand the material, not understanding for me that it wasn't that they couldn't get the material, but there was a huge cultural, social dimensions that were at play that were preventing that connection that I would normally have felt with audiences in the United States or in Norway or in other parts of Europe from happening at all. So at the end of the day, I pull aside one of my colleagues who had invited me to that. And I said, look, I just don't feel like we're connecting the audience and me. And I really feel concerned because I feel like I'm not doing my job. And it made me really sad. And so I talked to her for a while, and she was so wonderful that she had the confidence and the temerity to kind of come forward and say, Anthony, you're doing this wrong. Okay. You have not taken into account the issues around gender relations in the country, big cultural context, big gender issue, the religious connotations, and the social issues that these women face when they've had in the past to interact with men, especially men in positions of power and authority. And so I said, okay, I get it now. Wow. Could I have done this any more wrongly? So I said, okay, day 2, we're going to fix all of this. I came back in, and the first thing I did was just close my mouth. I said, look, it's time for us to work together again, but I realized that I messed up yesterday. So I'm going to stop talking for a minute, and I'm going to give you guys space to talk to each other, to talk to me, and to talk to the facilitator there that was from Ethiopia. And then suddenly you could see in the room things to start to relax out, and the women started to gain their voices. And when they saw me respond to their questions and their concerns and their considerations, they became more and more vocal. And then from then on, that second and third day, I was euphoric. It was the most wonderful experience that I had that year because I finally got to connect. But it was only because I realized that I had done something stupid. I had a colleague who was willing to call me in and who trusted me enough to say, Anthony, you're doing this wrong. Here's how to fix it. And I was lucky enough to have a group of participants that were willing to forgive my initial mistakes so that we could have a really exciting and wonderful experience on days 2 and 3. So it goes back to the inclusive leadership thing. You got to just stop talking.
But as well, you had here a very inclusive ecosystem, we can say. You know, they had Absolutely. An understanding of you to say, this white guy is messing up. We have to help him, you know. Yes. And as well, the part of your colleague, you know, to say, hey, you did it super wrong. I have to help you. And then as well, the part like you accept the help and they say, okay, yeah, I am doing totally wrong. So we have to do it in a different way. So I think that's an example of overall, 360 degrees of inclusiveness.
It was. If anything, they were leading more inclusively than I was in that moment. And so I was really, really lucky in that situation to learn a really critical lesson.
And I have another case of one. I wanted to talk to you about this because I think it's good for the audience to learn the case. One of the co-founders in one of the trainings on emotional intelligence, always, they are popping up a lot of critical cases in this type of workshops. So it was a case like they were doing an application for a US accelerator, and in the US, they are asking a lot of race questions.
Yeah, of course.
Here in Europe, we cannot because the GDPR, but in the US, they can ask this question. So they were asking, okay, how many people of color you have in your team? How many of the religion X, Y, Z, and then he put a person in color from another co-founder, but the co-founder, it was not a person of color. It was a person from Egypt. It's in Africa, but it's not everyone is this. Africa is quite big and diverse, and cultural diversity is full of expression in Africa.
Yeah.
And the other co-founder was super upset because I am not a person of color. And then the other co-founder didn't understand because he was to say like, no, but I see you are color. So it was a whole mess up situation, and I think they took some quite time to reflect themselves, to talk about identity, because that was how you identify yourself and how you open this question, how do you identify yourself, who you are. So in this case, talking about inclusive leadership and as well having a very diverse, but then from diversity create an inclusive environment. So how in this case you can deal with this situation, but as well from the beginning, not in a reactive way, but as well in a proactive way.
Yeah, I think this issue of identity and really the fluidity of identity, because a person of color may not identify as a person of color on day one, but because of a set of circumstances and contexts may mean that on day 10, they do identify as a person of color because they are racialized or because they're being discriminated against or whatever other reason. And so it's really important to, when we think about identity, that it's not a static thing and that it certainly isn't something that I can prescribe for someone else. So it's not for me to say that you are a woman or you identify along the LGBT spectrum or anything else. It's for you to identify as. And then if you have a relationship of trust and a comfortable feeling with disclosing those identities to me, then that is how that relationship that kind of works. So I think the first kind of misstep there, and we've all made these missteps, I as much as anyone, and this is part of the issues around having power and privilege, is we often don't realize we've made a mistake until after we've made that mistake. And it can be very embarrassing to say, oh, wow, I didn't realize that I messed up. And so it was good that they had that opportunity to reflect and have a discussion, a critical discussion around identity, as that person had tried to prescribe an identity onto their co-founder when that co-founder said, no, that's not me. We have people with disabilities, people who are blind, who don't identify as a person with a disability. So it's never appropriate for you as the person outside of another's experience to tell them what their identity is. And same goes for how the language they use to identify themselves. It's never for me to tell you how your pronouns should be used or how you would like to describe your identity. It's for you to tell me. Maybe it's for me to create space so you can open up and tell me, hey, this is how I identify. But it's never for me to put that on someone else. And in terms of an organization, the way I think diversity can create the most change and the most opportunity to be innovative, to attract new and better talent, to draw from the greatest resource pools of talent, to increase profitability, expand market share. The business model of the future is inclusive, but it's not looking at diversity from a superficial level. If we're just looking at someone, how they present themselves in terms of their gender, how they present themselves in terms of their race or ethnicity, how they present themselves as in terms of their disability or any other characteristic, if we're just looking at that superficially, then we end up with tokenism. So we end up having to say, okay, well, in each team, we have to have a woman. In each team, we have to have a person with a disability. In each team, we have to have a person of color. And that's not diversity. Diversity gets into the ways we think and act, our frames of reference, the background experiences that we draw on to inform what we do on a day-to-day basis. Now, a lot of times, in most instances, that can be informed by your gender identity, your identity as a person with a disability. We talk in disability rights a lot about lived experiences of person with disabilities. That brings a very unique perspective a lot of times to someone's experience. And so it's important that we're not looking at superficial characteristics, but we're looking behind that, and we're looking at how those characteristics may shape their experiences and how those experiences change their approaches, perspectives in the work that's being conducted. Because that's where the true value lies, is the diversity of perspectives on a problem to create a new solution or whatever it is that that company or organization is trying to achieve.
And this is reminding me because so we are a team, and we are developing this digital platform ongoing, all the time, based on the feedback, on focus group, on conversations. And one thing, how we work is like, I don't finish the design because I let the technical team, front and back end development, to provide the vision into the design. Because, and always there is this conflict between UX, graphic designers, software developers, and it's like they complain between each other. So like for me, it's very important to say, no, we are all together making this. So I give you a space, and the others, when the UX, they say, it's the first time, when we are putting all together, everyone. It's the first time I am talking to a software developer. I mean, like, oh my God. So it has to be every day, not to be exceptional thing. And has to be always this fluid conversation, like, Hara, you forget this. Yeah, I know, because it's not finished. Because we have to see, I cannot design every detail in Figma or whatever thing in paper, because it's not the reality. So we have to put there and test in a context environment to see what is missing,
Absolutely.
and have different types of testers and having discussions, and me or the UX or whatever, we accept like, there is nothing here for this. I mean, cool, yeah, we forgot. Yeah, because we are not in the context. So, and I think that's the part of now, like you were saying, like the different ways of thinking, perspectives, saying things in a completely different way. Mm-hmm. Even if we are trying to put us in a shoes of someone from a factory, 3 hours in the middle of nowhere in Vietnam, with not internet connection, how this person in this factory who has not knowledge about technology, they are not speaking English, they have a very bad internet connection, how they access to a platform to do something. You can always think and imagine and create this technology to be able, like it's working for them, but they have to tell you what they need,
Definitely.
And co-create with them, co-design, no?
Absolutely, absolutely. So it just brings to mind a saying that one of my students originated, but I've borrowed on a number of occasions, and that is, user-centered design is only as good as the user at the center of the design. And so what I take that to mean is that when you put someone like me, who is a person who has a lot of power and privilege in my life and in my work, when you put someone like me at the center of a design, all you're going to get is more of designs that work for people like me. But if you find ways to put someone that like you described, someone who lives in a rural environment, maybe someone who lives in the global South, maybe who's someone who is discriminated against because of their gender or their disability or any other reason, if you put someone like them at the center of a design process, then it will work better for everyone. It'll work better for me. It'll work better for you. And the people who are empowered already are going to get a great experience because you focused instead on the people who are most excluded, who are most marginalized, who hold intersectional identities. And that's how you create lasting change. That's how you create truly innovative technologies. And if you look at all the big tech firms who are really making this happen, they have institutionalized in their companies groups that are representative of a variety of different backgrounds and experiences that are actively contributing to design processes in a very agile way. So it's not just let's bring them in at the end of the process and test our technology with this group of people. It's let's involve them at the ideation stage and let's continually bring them back and evolve them repeatedly throughout. And this is also a key subject of the course that my company has created. It's out on the web at universal.design. It's the fundamentals of universal design. It deals a lot with co-creation, participatory design, and these exact issues that we're talking about.
And then we have the masterclass.
Yes, and then we have a great masterclass coming up very soon where we're going to talk about inclusive leadership, and we're going to talk about the key mechanisms behind empowering others. And it's coming from the perspective of me and all those wonderful, horrible mistakes I've made. And you'll get to hear the stories of all the people who are gracious enough, who trusted me enough to say, Anthony, you messed up. You done messed up. Here's how you fix it. And I've become a better person for it.
Thank you very much, Anthony.
It's an absolute pleasure and an honor. Hara, you are amazing. The work you're doing with Collabwith is phenomenal. And I'm really excited to see where we go with this.
Yeah, totally. Let's see the next version of Collabwith. I think it will be ready end of February.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I am incredibly happy about this. And I hope everyone as well like it.
I think they're going to love it. And you know, getting feedback from all of your audiences, that's where the real magic can happen.
Yeah, exactly. So, thank you, Anthony. Have a nice day.